Well, what do you know? I guess it can rain all the time. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of The Crow, the 5th film in the franchise and only the 2nd film to attempt to directly adapt the comic book series of the same name. So the original The Crow film from 1994 is a huge cult classic. It's a very iconic movie that I've always been a huge fan of, and mostly because of the unfortunate, tragic death of Brandon Lee during the production of that movie, it's been a property that has seemingly been cursed ever since. We did eventually have 3 sequels, but in my opinion, the sequels to The Crow have always been remakes in and of themselves. It's the same story, the same plot, just with a different character name and a few things swapped around. And they have actually been trying to directly adapt this comic book series again, or for us movie fans, seemingly remake the original film for quite a long time, and just have never been able to get themselves out of development hell. There was a version of this where Tom Hiddleston was going to be the Crow. There was a version where there was actually like test photos taken of Jason Momoa as the Crow, which I actually thought would have been pretty cool. And then sometime about a year or so ago, they officially said, we're doing this. We finally have a script that we like. We have a director on board. Bill Skarsgård is going to play Eric Draven in The Crow. It's finally happening. And as you could predict, pretty much all the Crow fans in unison said, no, don't do this. And I gotta be honest, as somebody who is a massive fan of that film and Brandon Lee's performance, I never really had that emotional reaction of, don't ever touch the Crow, nobody could ever do it. I think that there is a way to do this story in a modern context, or to do it in maybe a more faithful adaptation of the comic book series that could make it different enough to stand out while still not disrespecting or stepping on the legacy of that original film. My biggest hang-up is exactly what I just described with the 3 sequels, as well as a television series that I've never seen and actually neglected to mention. This is a story that we have already done multiple times, and it has been nothing but extreme diminishing returns. So what are they going to do different with the Crow story that merits going back? What are they going to do to justify this movie's existence beyond just banking off of a popular name? Then we got the still images of what Bill Skarsgård was going to look like. Was not a fan whatsoever. I am absolutely a champion of the fact that you should not judge still images. It always looks different in motion. They looked a little better in the movie, but still not a huge fan of the design of the character. And then the trailers were fine. So I wasn't necessarily optimistic, but I was certainly curious and willing to give it a shot. And then came the review embargo, which is something that is extreme rarity. They made the review embargo, I think, an hour, maybe even 2 hours after the first public showings. So until the first people on planet Earth are able to publicly walk into the movie theater and experience it, only after that showing is over did they legally allow critics to give their opinions.
This is gonna be bad.
Which is not only absolute horseshit practice under Lionsgate and is absolutely scummy on their part, but not a good sign. Doesn't show a whole lot of confidence. So I walked into this movie tonight, and my assumption was that this was going to be just an okay movie. You know, I'm more forgiving on reimaginings or remakes, whatever you want to consider this story. I like seeing new modern takes on things. Yes, we get disappointed plenty of times, but I'm willing to give them a shot. If it sucks, we don't ever have to watch it again. And if it's awesome, we get a new cool iteration of something that I like. And so I figured this was probably going to land somewhere like the RoboCop or the Total Recall remakes, where huge fans of the original don't necessarily accept it. They say that it's shit. Most people that are casual fans are going to go, hey, that was actually pretty decent. And very few people say that it's awesome. And now after seeing it, unfortunately, I can tell you that while it might not be as bad as some people feared, it ain't good. So starting off with the positives of The Crow, I do think that there is some interesting attempts at doing visual storytelling here. This is a readaptation of the comic book storyline, and they deal a lot more with the mystical and the supernatural in this version than we did in the 1994 film. And some of the ways that they tried to visualize that with the things going on inside of Bill Skarsgård's head, as well as like this limbo area that he goes to a couple of times throughout the film, where he seemingly kind of gets his bidding and gets his powers. I think there was some interesting things done there visually. I can't lie, I enjoyed the carnage candy that we got in this one. This is definitely a hard R film. It's much more violent than any other Crow iteration that we have gotten, and I think that that's interesting. You know, that's one step into doing something different that I can appreciate. I like my carnage candy, I like my gory kills, and you get a decent amount of it here. You have a whole sequence, essentially, in an opera that we've seen a good bit of in the trailer where he massacres a whole bunch of people. He turns into, like, Crow Wick for a little bit there, and didn't hate it. When Bill Skarsgård is actually in full Crow mode, I think that he does a damn good job. I think that physically, he is a very capable actor. He's got some intimidation factor. He handles the action sequences and the fighting sequences very well. Even in scenes where he's not necessarily fighting, he's just standing there shirtless, all tattooed up, and that ripped bastard. He looks like somebody that could probably kick some ass. So as far as the darker side of the Eric Draven character, or I guess just Eric, since they don't call him Draven in this one, the darker side of Eric that we get in this film, I think that he does well. And my final positive, and honestly the thing that I enjoyed most about this film, is the way that they find a new way to explore his regeneration powers. Whereas in the previous films, they don't really tend to affect the Crow character all that much. In this one, he still feels all of the pain of every bullet, every stab wound, every broken bone, and he also has to aid in his body's regeneration. So if he breaks his leg, he's got to snap his leg back into place. If he gets stabbed and some guts are coming out of his abdomen, he's got to push them back inside. And so again, going along with the carnage candy, I think that that was actually a pretty gnarly element. I wish they would have done more with it. And so that's something that definitely makes this version stand out, where I'm going, hey, it's pretty fucking cool. More of that, please. And now moving on to the negatives. This movie is dreadfully paced. And that's something I don't say very often, because pacing issues is something that gets assigned to so many movies where it doesn't make sense. It's kind of a catch-all phrase that a lot of people use to describe a movie that they just didn't really enjoy. This movie takes so fucking long to get moving, and then once it does, it is over before you even really feel like you're in the middle of all the action. That, by definition, is a horribly paced movie. I mean, it's an hour and 15 minutes before he even becomes the Crow. And the hour and 15 minutes that precedes that is about 40 minutes of them trying to establish this relationship between Eric and Shelley and doing a terrible job of it, and we will talk about that, and about 30 to 40 minutes of Eric Draven being nervous and scared and kind of a giant puss about his new powers and just kind of fucking around investigating things, which essentially boils down to him going to one person that he recognizes from this killing and getting their cell phone, which gives him a piece of information that leads him to somebody else that did part of the killing, where they have a cell phone that gives him another piece of information that sends him to somebody else. It is so fucking boring and thin. Once he's actually the Crow and starts kicking ass, it's a very entertaining movie, but that's about this much of the fucking runtime. And I didn't mind it at first, because I was actually intrigued, curious, and hopeful in the fact that they were clearly going to explore the relationship between Eric and Shelley a lot more than we got in the original film. And I'm not trying to compare this movie directly to that original film in 1994 as much as I can. I try to take it on its own merits, but it's impossible not to in some regard. But this is the biggest thing that is a huge disparity from how it was executed in 1994 to how it is executed in 2024. In that original film, it might be generous to say we got 2 minutes of screen time, just in these quick flashes and a little bit of exposition of the actual relationship between Eric and Shelley. And there is nobody that will watch that film that is going to tell you that they don't feel invested in that relationship, that they doubt Eric's love for that woman, that they don't feel the tragedy and the love side of what the Crow represents. They spend 30 plus minutes on it in this movie, and you feel nothing! In this new iteration, it basically boils down to a couple of junkies that fuck during the day, go to some raves, and get tattoos. That screams love, doesn't it? They don't really get you to buy into their eternal love at all. Part of it's because there's no chemistry between the actors. Part of it's just because it feels like we're meeting them at the beginning of the relationship, and it is just so fast-forwarded that you don't really buy into this love at first sight that transcends the afterlife shit that they're trying to get you to buy into, which is the entire point of The Crow. And the more time that they spend on this in the first act of the film, the more impatient that you get, because you're just seeing a collection of scenes of these two together that just, they don't develop anything as a couple. They're just doing shit. And that is just a huge issue with the point of this film. Like, you have to buy into and completely invest yourself in the power of the love of these two characters to buy into this entire concept from the get-go. And you just don't. So he goes to the afterlife and is told, oh, it's just a level of sadness and a level of tragedy that has now transcended the regular rules of the afterlife, and now you are stuck here until you right the wrongs. And you just can't get there as an audience member. You're like, really? A couple of junkies that had a fling, and one of them got both of them killed because she did some extremely stupid shit. That is a tragedy that transcends the regular afterlife rules? No, I'm not buying it. And if that wasn't poorly handled enough, they try to insert extra elements into the story to bring, like, more explanation and more tragedy and more context to the killing of these two characters. That's just, it's not needed. All it needs to be is the tragedy of lovers that are killed before their time. That's all it is. It is a simple concept, execute it simply. But in here, they try to incorporate like this conspiracy where Shelley had this video on her phone that incriminates Danny Huston, who's the villain of the film, and so he's sending all of his lackeys after her, and she almost gets caught, so she gets herself arrested for drug charges to get thrown into rehab, thinking that she's going to be safe, and that's where she meets Eric Draven, and then 5 minutes later, they show up at the rehab center, so suddenly Eric Draven and her escape and haul ass, and you would think anybody with a quarter of a brain cell in their body would go, okay, time to get the fuck out of Dodge. No, they go home, they shower, they fuck, they go get tattoos, they go to raves, and it's like, bitch, are you forgetting that there's people after you? So even that breaks the tragedy, because they kind of deserve it. Like, you're dumb as fuck. I don't feel bad for you. You should have left and you didn't. You just fucked around and now you get killed. That's what you get. And that is the first of a number of things that this movie does to completely contradict itself and undercut something that they're trying to develop by incorporating something else in there that doesn't need to be there. Most notably the second act, which is entirely focused around Eric Draven coming back with these powers that he's trying to figure out, going through this investigation that I've already described, and that's exactly what I describe. And the entire time, he's like nervous about it. He's kind of quirky and scared and like, I don't really know what to do. And as I've already said, I like the Crow version of what Bill Skarsgård is doing. But the Eric Draven, the human side of him, before he gets full made up and goes vengeance mode, I did not like whatsoever. I don't want my Crow to be a pussy, okay? It just contradicts what we come to this movie for. It contradicts what the character represents. Somebody that is so vengeance-fueled that they have come back from the dead and they will stop at nothing until all of these people that wronged him and his loved one are fucking dead. And you spend 40 minutes with him kind of not really wanting to do it and being unsure about it. And that hesitance in and of itself is another example of the movie undercutting and contradicting itself, because it undermines his love for Shelley. It undermines what is supposed to be such a powerful love that transcends all of these different worlds. And he can't decide if he wants to shoot these motherfuckers that murdered him and his girlfriend brutally. Why? You also have that little central mystery there, which is the origins and the nature of this little video that Shelley has that is causing all these people to come after her and inevitably murder the main two characters. And the movie like plays coy with what's going to be revealed on that video. We just see pieces of it throughout the movie until right about the end of the second act. And when it inevitably shows the full uncut version of that video, it's not really much of a reveal. You're like, yeah, you've already told us that that's what Danny Huston does. We know. What the fuck is this supposed to be for the audience? And what it ends up being for Eric is yet another thing for unexplained reasons that gets him to kind of doubt his love for Shelley, which undercuts the movie. And speaking of Danny Huston, dude's a great actor. I'm fucking bored with his villainous performances. He was great in 30 Days of Night. He was great in a television series called Magic City that a lot of you probably never heard of. pretty much every other performance since then, he's given us the exact same character over and over. You could interchange this character with his character from X-Men Origins Wolverine or his character from Wonder Woman and just change a couple little things. It's the same performance. Now, the script and the cut of the movie does him no favors because he's not really explored or not really built up too much, so you feel like you're at arm's distance with him the entire film, but it's just a generic villainous performance. Nothing about him stands out, and absolutely nothing stands out about any of his henchmen, which, forgive me for once again comparing it directly to the 1994 film, but that's one of the best and most iconic elements of that movie, is how everybody from Michael Wincott all the way down to David Patrick Kelly stood out. And the final negative is that I really did not appreciate how this movie wrapped up. It seemed so clear to me that this was a reshoot or was a second version of an ending that they tacked on just in case they had enough confidence that they were going to make a sequel, and they wanted to leave just enough open and unanswered so that maybe they have some room to do that. And checking the numbers, that's not gonna fucking happen. And lo and behold, I posted my quick little blurb reaction on Twitter, and by the time I got home, one of the responses was somebody clipping out a piece of the Wikipedia article quoting Bill Skarsgård himself, saying that the movie has this secondary ending that they decided to go with for the theatrical cut that leaves things a little open, and he was not so happy about it. If your lead actor is telling you that the ending that potentially gets them a second job and more money is not a good idea, maybe listen to them. All in all, guys, I'm genuinely disappointed in this one. I had a little bit of faith. I didn't expect it to be great, but I did not expect to be so frustrated walking out of this movie. And while it is definitely not terrible, like, it's watchable, it's nowhere near the bottom of the year so far. It's not even close to being the worst Crow movie that we've gotten yet. But I don't even think it's the best Crow sequel that we have gotten, and I'm shocked that that wasn't a bar that they could leap over. So if you're morbidly curious how this turned out, by all means, check it out, come back, let me know what your thoughts are, but I highly encourage everybody that's going to the movies this weekend to give the money you were going to give to The Crow to Strange Darling. It's a much more deserving film and a significantly better experience. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my 2024 new release reviews, and I'm also going to put my playlist of Crow reviews. I've reviewed every film that they've released so far. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.